the purpose of maybe today's discussion is to talk about some of the things that we think really move the needle for you and how to approach it with your agent clients and how to discuss pre-sale renovations so that they can think a little bit more like an investor. And it's I don't know, we'll talk about strategy about how we bring it up. But that's the ultimate goal. We want people to maximize the return on their investment, right? You want a home that's as renovated as it can possibly be, looking as good as it's possibly going to look, given what goes into it, priced appropriately, and then the rest kind of takes care of itself. So that's kind of how we come at it, and where market ready kind of slots in into the world of getting people's homes ready to sell. It's all that we do, focus on pre-sale renovations, market ready remodeling. Hopefully is somewhat descriptive in the name. So that's how we approach it. So that's kind of who we are, Justin. I don't know how much more you would like to uh, do as far as do you have some things you wanted to kind of ask about, moderate? I can go into my
Yeah.
spiel about how I approach the whole business, but you tell me what you think is the most beneficial.
So if you're just watching this, just joining, I want to introduce Gage as well. But Mark and Rob founded Grid along with Jess, who's the real brains that runs the whole thing and makes it go. So I call him Professor Bex. But I'm really curious. I think there's a couple of things. We lay a foundation, right? If you want to like lay that out there, and then I think we can go through some questions. What I
Sure.
found doing this before sometimes is it's helpful to lay the foundation first because I know for me, sometimes I want to ask a really specific question. I've got his best deciding what do you think I should do with the Bex
Yeah.
instead of maybe laying a general foundation. So, Gage, how'd you get involved in this? Like, what's your background? Like, what's exciting to about this with you? Like, why are you doing this, Gage?
Um, it's been a fun journey. I've been in construction my entire life. I worked in management for Toll Brothers for about 10 years, and then I did hospitality hotel setup for another 10 years. When I came back, I started my company, and fates would have it, we aligned with Rob Chavez, Mike Capella, um, and eventually met Mark. So we're all in that same region and industry, so our paths crossed. And the more we looked at things and was invited in to projects and just learning, it just became obvious that I wanted to continue to my journey along aligning paths with those same guys. And here we are. We're able to create a business model together, use all of our best strengths, and service the community in the area for exactly that purpose.
So, love that. Bex, what do you think? Let's start laying the groundwork. When we're talking about pre-listing renovations that actually move the needle. What are the biggest mistakes you see people making in this area?
Yeah. So the big part of this is, as agents and as people that renovate houses, we might already know what a house should look like and what work someone should do and what repairs they should make. A big part of the process, though, is getting your client to come along with that, right? And so first we have to kind of put ourselves in the shoes of our clients. They've lived in these homes for however many days, weeks, months, or years, right? And they're typically thinking of it from the experience that they've had living in the home. And so one of the first things we have to do is try to get people to think, okay, well, remember, we're about to change the experience that people have with your home. People are going to be coming to your home and deciding if they like the way it looks and they like the way it feels and does it work for their family and for their situation. And so everything from where they first encounter your home to when they get inside of it and hopefully fall in love with it is the journey that we are now going on. And so, Mr. and Ms. Homeowner, I need you to now put your buyer hat back on and remember when you bought this home. You went through the front door. This house may have a garage, and you've probably gone through the garage door for the last 20 years. You may not even have gone through the front door. But remember, buyer hat on. They're going to pull up to a driveway, get out, walk up that lead walk to the front door. And starting from there with what someone sees when they pull up and where they park and how they get in and the first handle they touch, those are the things that we want to focus on. So we kind of have our people start thinking like the buyer and not the seller, right? And we tell them when we get to an appointment to look at a renovation, we'll maybe be one of the first contractors that you've met that maybe talks you out of some stuff because a lot of times homeowners will, because they've been in the home for 20 years, think, man, it would have been awesome to have a bidet. As a guy, I'd need a urinal in the bathroom. That's what I would have done if we were going to stay here and I was going to put $50,000 into the upstairs of this house. And so we have to get people thinking that's cool. A lot of neat stuff that you've got in your head there for what this house needs. But remember, what we're really looking to do is just get a buyer to fall in love with this home as close to as it sits as possible with a good agent, well priced. We want to do the things that are just going to get people to like it as it is, not with the blown out kitchen of your dreams that you never got around to, not with the addition off the back that may be a great idea, but that's probably not the thing that's actually going to get you the most money. Those aren't the things that we're talking about. So we set it up with that kind of uh, uh, it's a request. We request that our customers think of themselves now as buyers, think of what a buyer might most pay attention to, and then we kind of build off of that, right? So uh, my first thing is do that, and then my second kind of piece of advice for everyone is you just nothing beats reps, right? And experience in a thing. And so this is where if you have experience at all working with buyers, it is tremendously helpful, right? If you've ever been in a car with a buyer and pulled up to a house, you know what they're looking at the first thing. And you've been in a house where they pull up and like, nope, keep going, right? Or they open the door and they're like, nope, next, right? Nothing beats that experience. But the next best thing from having that experience of working with buyers is sitting open houses and going to open houses. And then you at least get a very similar experience with how buyers experience a home, right? That's what we want. This is all about buyers. We're working for the seller, but we're really working to impress a buyer. And we want to know what they think, what they want, what they don't like, or the kinds of things that they're going to be looking for. So, agents, I encourage you to get in as many open houses as you possibly can for lots of reasons, but not the least of which for this one, it will make you better prepared to have conversations with sellers when you know what buyers are looking for, right? So those are kind of my opening, not even related to the work, just kind of the mindset that we really want the clients to have and some of that background that I want agents to have to approach this. I hope that makes some sense.
No, that's great. And before Rob says polish the penny, before I jump to Gage, one of the things that I share with agents, that I did in my career is working open houses. When you see a a buyer that has an agent, it's incredible because you don't have to worry about going on a date. You can just be friends. So I can ask them, how's the experience going? How did you find your agent? What's it like purchasing a home? What do you think of this home? And that's priceless information. I'm getting real-time data about what's happening in the market. If I work open houses regularly and I've talked to 20 or 30 buyers that weekend, like I am a market expert and I've got better market information than, a seasoned agent. We're moving in a fast market. I love that info. Gage, same question to you. Like, I'm curious to hear your take on that. What's the biggest, and I love you laying out the framework, Bex, because they're just not looking at it from a buyer the buyer hat. What's the biggest mistake you see people making when they're going to do pre-market renovations? Because we've all come in and taken a listing or gone on a listing appointment where they show you how they spent the money, and you're like, yeah, that's not what I would have done with the money.
Yeah, and I mean, back Mark covered it really well. Was you live in these houses for X amount of years, and you have all these desires that you would have done with the home. You've really got to disconnect. So there, it's really where the mistakes lay. Is you'll see people go ahead and do that kitchen upgrade that maybe we didn't really need to. Maybe just some countertops, but we're going to continue to navigate those by getting in front of them. It really is just those mistakes, really focus on what's going to sell the house instead of what you imagined that it could have been while you were there.
What does sell houses? I guess is a great segue into that, you know.
I
What
mean, it's a bit of a process, but start with the comps. Look and see what's selling right there on your street and in your neighborhood, and what did they do to get the price that you're desiring. And think simple, fresh paint, update some carpeting and some flooring, faucet fixtures, things that don't work need to work properly and have some aesthetic appeal.
I think of things in cost per square foot or benefit per square foot basis, right? I talk about this a lot. Like try to get everything in your life into 1 square foot. And then if I know what it costs here, it should cost the same thing over there, or I know what has the most value, per foot here, let me apply it somewhere else. So similarly, as Gage said, probably the thing that you see the most square footage of in any home is the paint, the color. So starting from the outside, what color is the trim, the base house, the front door? What do I see the most of when I pull up? And if the thing I see the most when I pull up is the bright pink door, maybe that's not exactly the vibe that we're looking for this particular house. Uh, so we start with color because I think also for cost reasons. If you're going to put money into a home, well, I'm sorry, one step before that, we've assumed that we've showed up to a house that is empty and ready to be painted or worked on. The very first thing everyone could do and should do for themselves to make more money when they sell their home is clean and remove and declutter, right? We all know this, and it's back to the psychology of how you get your seller to do what's best for themselves, even though it's not necessarily easy. No one wants to clean, no one wants to declutter, and no one wants to live in a home that looks like it's ready for an open house. But that's still what you got to do. And of course, we can help with that. We tell people, look, if it's just an issue of getting things boxed and stored and moved, we can do that. But honestly, the very best thing you can do is get the junk car out of the driveway, get your grandma's old couch out of the living room, get all of the weeds pulled out of the front, like just do the basic cleanup stuff. And then we can start kind of adding and fixing and tweaking, and we can do all of those things too, but I want them to know that there is real value in doing some of the less comfortable things for kind of cleaning and decluttering. And everybody knows it, right? They all go, "Yeah, I know, I know." But they do need someone to emphasize that this is important to be done. So after that, after you've decluttered and cleaned and gotten the home as empty as they possibly can live with, and I'll get to maybe later what we'll fill it back up with again if they empty it too much. Empty it as much as you can, and then we focus, I think, first on paint because it just goes the farthest for your dollar. I can cover the most square feet, have the most impact, and do the most refresh. I can do the most modernizing. I can do the most cleaning of a space with paint. Second to paint is probably floors. Same thing. It's all about square footage. It's the thing you see the most. You walk in, you see the walls, you see the floor. So those are probably the biggest per square foot impacts that you can make on just about any home anywhere. And Gage, I don't know if you have any of the things off this list, but we get those remodeler magazines and builder magazines, and every once in a while they'll like rank the whatever 100 most uh, valuable home improvements and things that pay off the best. Gage, do you happen to recall what seems to be number one fairly often on those lists of things you should do?
I would say it's still paint, but I don't get the magazine.
It should be paint, right? The thing that I've
Yeah.
seen come up like a bunch of times is the front door. Somehow someone did
Okay.
math, right? And they say if you change the front door, an average front door cost is like $450 and it adds like $1,000 to the house. there is no way to prove that, unfortunately, right? The only way to do that is to build identical homes and have one have a different whatever, right? And then see which one sells faster and for more money. We come as close to that as we can with comps. And so this is all, I think, a matter of a little conjecture and opinion, which is where I always go back to, okay, what have I heard buyers say? What have I heard them complain about? What have I heard them rave about? And so you'll be building that database. And so, Justin, you say landscaping. I agree. It is, again, one of the first things you see when you pull up to the house. So that's trimming overgrown hedges, getting the toilet out of the front yard as a planter, uh, just doing some of the basic stuff. You don't have to do a ton, and landscaping is one of the harder things actually to get really nice and beautiful on a budget, because landscaping, when it looks good, is typically older, and older takes time, and time means money. So nice landscaping is actually really expensive. And so usually the most landscaping we do beyond cleaning is mulching. Again, think square feet. How many square feet can I cover with a $4 bag of mulch? I can get 2 or 3 feet with that, right? So mulching goes a long way on the outside. Landscape stones and things go a long way on the outside. If there's not a walkway, getting some relatively inexpensive pavers to get you some kind of reasonable walkway up to the house that looks okay is usually a pretty good return on money. And then that front door, I don't know that I agree that that is the highest return of pieces of parts that you can bolt to a house. But that's the thing that gets talked about because it's a couple $100. It's a few $100, depending on how nice the door is, plus some installation. But it is one of the first things that a person engages with when they get to the home. It's the first knob that they touch. It's the first thing they come nose to nose with. But before even that, you're looking at, is the roof like peeled off or dirty, or can we just kind of pressure wash it? Back to Rob's point earlier about polishing the penny. We don't typically show up and say, all right, well, the roof is, a little bit dusty. Let's give you a new roof. Yes, that might help, but buyers don't typically spend a whole lot of time like standing up at the front, kind of looking up at the front, right? The other thing that I tell buyers is there are things that may be important when we get further down the process, maybe at a home inspection if you have one, or once they've brought mom and dad over and they start kind of really nitpicking the house that they're now going to buy. But remember, at that point, they're under contract. They've already bought the home when they get there with their home inspector. So I'm really not as worried about those things as I am getting them under contract. We need to get them to love it. We need to get them to make that offer. So does a new roof get you that offer? Usually not, unless you're like missing big chunks of roof, right? Fine. If it's super obvious from the street, deal with that. If your gutter is like hanging off the front of the house, deal with that. Anything that really starts to look like badly deferred maintenance, those are things that buyers don't really care to see, right? So we're looking for those deferred maintenance things on the outside, and then looking to move the needle as much as we can on the inside. And paint and floor, I think if you have to start somewhere after cleaning, it's paint, floor, and Justin, to your point, maybe even a little bit at the front, because we've got to get them through the front door, right? So if there's something really obnoxious or really broken or deferred maintenance looking on the outside, we're gonna want to take care of that too. And then a lot of that, pro tip, depends on the season. When it's like, it's going to be here in the DC area today, 70 degrees, people take longer to get to the door. They're going to stand outside. They're going to like take it all in, and they're going to move around. In January around here, when it's 30 degrees outside, they get out of that car and they run into the house. So there's less focus needed on the outside stuff. If there's 4 inches of snow on the ground, they're not going to notice that the petunias are dead. But if it's springtime, then it maybe also changes the calculus a little bit, because people will spend more time outdoors around the home checking out the outside of the home. So that's another thing to think about.
If they like the house, you will end up discussing the terms of this offer for 15 to 30 minutes, depending on your clients, standing in the driveway. They will spend more time in that front yard when you're discussing the offer than they're ever going to spend after they move into the house.
Right.
People don't stand in their front yard looking at their house.
That's right.
So you got some eyesore. I've seen it. Like this is the stuff to your point about like put your buyer hat on. This is what we're looking at. Like
Yep.
it makes a difference. Like on when I'm standing outside, am I falling more in love with that house and having a positive emotional reaction, or is the outside hideous? Right? That's what curb appeal matters. Curb appeal matters when I send it to my brother-in-law, Aaron Kavanaugh, and he's so excited, but then his wife sees it and she's just tearing apart the pictures. They're like, no, no, trust me. It looks better in person. Like you want to get the feedback loop going. So, I got some, curious to hear the biggest question I always get on these, and then no contractor ever wants to answer these, is around costs. So I can think of a couple general ways to do this too. But so basically, people always want to know what are the costs, that we should know for a renovation. And one way to answer that might be like, what's an average price you see on projects? Maybe like that, hey, if I look at all the jobs in aggregate,
Yeah.
generally it varies very much, but generally on a budget level, people are allocating 12,000 for these sorts of things. And then we can get into some specifics. So I don't know if there's, that's just me being curious. And then people always want to know, hey, what should I have in mind for carpet or flooring or paint if I'm just trying to walk through a house and get an idea. I don't know how you guys estimate that. I used to have a
Gage,
really
you want to take a run at budget chat and then I can do the same?
Yeah, yeah, I'll take a run at it. It really does depend on the house, obviously, the market that it's in, the neighborhood that it's in, what the out sale value should be when we're done. Um, but generally speaking, so there's a percentage based off of that. But generally, some of these projects run 12, $15,000. Some of them upwards of 35, $50,000 for the same types of things, just bigger homes, a little bit more square footage. Um, so yeah, there's no definitive. You need to have $15,000 set aside in your mind. Yeah, you
The
want to take
the
a
way I
stab at it,
think
Mark?
about it, yeah, the way I'd ask people to think about it is again, I've got my buyer hat on for what I want someone to see, but hopefully the reason you've got us here is we've also always got our investor hat on. And so again, I am always thinking about return. Whatever I spend, if it's $5 or $50,000, I'm looking to get a good return on that investment. What moves the needle? What's going to get me the highest price, the best terms, sold the quickest, right? So I tell people we can help you maximize whatever that budget is. If you'd like to know, our average, I believe, pre-sale renovation comes in at about 38, 39,000. And on average, that means we're painting, we're doing flooring, we're doing some exterior trim work. A lot of times those are easily deferred maintenance things that, people like, oh yeah, I'll get to the windows next year. Everybody's got a little bit of rotted trim around a house that if it's January, maybe they don't see it, but if it's a nice warm day, people walk up, they will see because they're going to the front door, you're going into the garage, they'll walk by that bay window in the front with all the rotted trim on it. So we do a lot of rotted trim repair because that just really does not help you sell a house if you've got bad, janky, rotted looking trim on the outside. And then I think somebody mentioned in the comments lighting. That's almost always a part of the program to either change out light fixtures, add them where it's relatively straightforward and easy to do, punch up the amount, brightness, color of lighting, or get sometimes the color more appropriate. I was in a house the other day and they had all of the can lights turned on to the super cool bright white blue, and it gives you almost like a hospital effect sometimes in the hallways. And say, hey, actually, I get it. You want light, but we want the right light. So these are adjustable. Look here. We pull the can down like click, click, click. Now we've gone 2 or 3 shades lower warmer and it actually feels better, even if it's maybe slightly dimmer. And if it gets too dim, hey, let's just add another light, right? So lighting is one where it's usually pretty easy to kind of move the needle. And then as far as budget goes, I find that most people have some thought around it. They definitely know what they don't want to spend or what they feel like they can't afford to spend. So without making it an exercise and trying to figure out what your maximum is, it's talking about these are the things that are going to move the needle, we think the most. It's paint, it's flooring, it's lighting, it's repairs, it's that outside trim, whatever's broken on the inside, that dodgy sink that's been dripping into a bucket that you've been meaning to get around to for a while. Let's go ahead and take that out because buyers do open a bunch of doors. You don't want them opening a door and seeing your nasty P-trap under there that's been dripping for 2 years. So anything that's really obviously not working correctly, let's do those things. And that can, on average for us, usually end up being somewhere in the 30s, but we've done renovations up to 6 figures because that was what that home needed. That was the size of home. It had that much material go into it, and it still was the right thing to do. And sometimes it can make sense that all you need to do is paint and steam clean the carpet. That can be a $7,000 job, and that still helps. That still will help you move the needle with a fresh, clean house that you otherwise didn't have. So we can meet you where you are on a number. We can talk about how you can finance the repairs and renovations if you need to do that. But really, it's all about doing the right amount of work. And it's usually not wholesale gut renovations of kitchens. And if it is, then we say, all right, well, these cabinets here are obviously about 45 years old. We can see in consultation with your agent that the comps show that kitchens that have at least a decent amount of renovation done to them have sold for here. And I can tell you versus what we're starting with now, if we use the materials that we use, because again, we don't go and get the fanciest, highest end European custom kitchen cabinets. We have lines that are appropriate for what we do. Again, it's cost versus value. We want to maximize value, and buyers of your home, in most cases, for most homes, aren't climbing around inside the cabinets looking at the brand names and the hinges and the dovetail. They want it to be nice, to be good. And so we focus on those materials so that if we do replace a thing, we're doing it in a way that it maximizes the value of the thing that we're doing. So all of those are kind of related to that budget discussion. The other thing that we try to do for people is tell them when we get through this process and we've gone through the house and we've collaborated with your agent on what we all can agree are the things that probably should be on the list to consider for renovation. We give you a proposal that hopefully outlines as much as we can reasonably in detailed different things. So we'll try to tell you how much the paint is separate from the flooring, separate from the lighting, separate from the trim repair, separate from the non-working pool, separate from the hole in the roof, right? And we'll try to line item as much as reasonably possible so that the seller and their agent can collaborate and think, all right, so if the paint is $10,000 to paint this home, do we feel like that's as necessary as the $4,000 bathroom fixture replacement to get you the new vanity and the new mirror and the light and the toilet? Because if we've got a limited budget, or we know we're not going to come in above a certain price, we do need to prioritize. And so obviously giving people an option, a menu to choose from helps them prioritize. So we try to do that for folks. And so I would encourage anyone that's working with a contractor within reason to try to get them to line item as much as they can of things and don't just give you a proposal that says renovated house, $45,000, right? That's not quite as valuable as this is the paint, this is the floor, this is the lighting. Within reason, we it just doesn't make a lot of sense in most cases for us to tell you like to the nail exactly what everything might potentially cost, because then it also invites people to think, well, like, can I do this one thing somehow differently or cheaper or better? We also want to stress to people that part of the benefit here is it all gets done. You don't manage it. We are able to take care of all of these things. So as long as all of the prices are roughly reasonable in and of themselves, what's the final menu that you want to have? Based on these selections that I've given you, we don't give you anything that we don't think will help and that we don't think will actually move the needle, be worth what you're going to invest in it, and give you a return on that investment. But if you think, well, I can probably live without, cleaning up the areaway in the backyard from the basement, fine, then we'll take that line item out. And so we can tweak the budget to where the client needs to be or where they want to be, right? So budget gets built based first on need and then of course on size of the home and just how much is going into it. Uh, so a 600 square foot condo might need less work than a 10,000 square foot, 3 or 4 level home. People, I think, naturally can figure that out. But we try to get them there while always being mindful and reminding them that the entire point of this is do those things and only those things that provide the best value. We are here to polish. We are not here to gut renovate. And so I just remind them of that, and hopefully that makes people feel a little more confident that whatever the number is, it's based on return on investment. It's based on what's actually going to help you get the home sold, best price, best terms, fast as possible, right? Uh, what did I miss? Go ahead, Justin. Yeah, I think you're muted.
If I'm watching this, we have a national audience, and I'm going to throw this to Gage because you're dropping some bombs, and we've got 10 minutes. I want to try to get some direct answers. So we're going to go to Gage. We're getting some. An efficient in a few words. Um, and Mark has really laid out like a great framework on how to approach this stuff.
Mark is not efficient, so you're right. Move, get Gage in.
No, no, no. So just if you mentioned 30,000, what's the median price? And you have mentioned this, Mark. Like, what are homes selling for in your area so we can scale? Like the median in my area now is 360. Before COVID, it was in the twos. It was maybe 270. So like probably not spending 30K. It'd be 10% of the whole price of the home. Like how much are these homes you're working on selling for? Are they like 600, 700?
Yeah, for the most part, they are. That median price is closer to 600,000, 700,000,
Okay, so different levels of
and,
equity.
and up and up. Yeah.
Gotcha. What if I'm walking through here and I'm trying to get, do you have like how could I in my market get an idea for how much it costs to paint a house or to put I'm looking at a ranch house. I know you probably not have a lot of, but I'm just looking at a ranch house. I in my head have a calculator. If I'm walking through and I'm looking, there's not chairs, not transitions. I've got a reasonable idea in my head of like, okay, LVP costs about this much per foot. Carpet is about this much per foot. Just in my so I can start getting, like, man, how much would it cost to knock out some of this stuff? So I'm within a range. Because I find my clients
Yeah.
have no idea and they'll price wildly, and especially on the buy side too. We'll walk through a house and they're like, it's 30,000. And I was like, it is not 30,000. It is like 7,000 for what you're looking for
Right.
paint.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think of the range that you're looking for. You walk into a house, you know the square footage of the home. Depending on how beat up, banged up, how many pictures they had hanging on the wall, what are we really going to have to do to get it painted? You're in that $6 to $8 square foot range of the square foot of the home, not calculating all the wall space and door counts. It's a real chopped up house that tends to get a little bit higher. Um, with a lot more trim work. If you got the 3-piece, 4-piece crown molding and all these elegant features, it's going to get a little bit more pricey. Yeah,
And if you
walking
got to
into your
do
basic,
drywall repair and holes in the wall, right? Those are all going to be more. But if I'm walking through and just like the colors are terrible, then that's a much more straightforward, paint job. That makes sense.
exactly.
Yep. And then when I'm looking at flooring, I guess would it be like getting a good idea of what materials are in my area, separate from installation of just like it to put back in luxury tile or real hard hand scraped hardwoods is going to be a different cost to put in LVP.
Yeah, your hand scraped hardwoods are going to be a lot more. A decent little rule of thumb that you could play with LVP, just double the product cost. If it's $3 a square foot, you're probably looking at about $6 a square foot finished product installed. Um, Generally speaking, with your hardwoods, your pre-finishes, it's roughly the same. You're probably going to spend close to $10 a square foot for a really nice product, and you're going to pay, $7, $8, up to $10 a square foot when it's all said and done, to get it all installed. Tiles where it's a little bit different. There's a lot more work that goes into setting tile than just buying the tile off the shelf, and the actual tile tends to be a little bit cheaper than the installed finished product.
That could make sense. And then and then, if you're looking at tile can really vary in terms of the product. If I'm doing large format versus mosaic, right? Versus subway tile.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and tile tends to be a really personalized thing. We got tile in houses. You're selling your house and you've got some tile. Like, let's fix that. Let's get in and add the broken pieces, polish up the grout, clean up what you already have. Tile can really add a personal touch that you're not looking to put on market. Like, you're looking to sell the house, so you're done putting your personal touches on it, the fancy backsplash and things like that. Let's just keep things really neutral and clean and simple, and build off of what you already have.
And Jamie asked
So
a great question. No, thank you. This is helpful, and some of this stuff is just working in your area to get a good idea, right? If I walked through a house and I recently had it painted, you've got common sense. Hey, we just painted this 3-2 that was 1,400 square feet, and it cost about 5,000. So, right, should be around somewhere around there. And if it's not, they're going to tell us, here's why it's more. This was different in this way. Um, Jamie asked, how if I'm walking through a house, how do I determine ROI? Well, Jamie, you want to unmute and ask it yourself? Jamie's our new leader from she's driving. Let's not be dangerous. What's the best way to determine ROI? If I replace flooring and paint, what should I see in terms of sales price? Is
Yeah.
that you can ask
So
Jamie? Yeah.
return on investment, how you actually calculate it, how do you justify this thing that you're debating whether or not to do. So this is where I put my investor hat on, and there is no, again, perfect way to answer this, because the only way I could tell you definitively is to try to sell your house as it is, get the best offer that I could, do work to it, and then see what the offer is after we've done work to it, and then determine, all right, did I get more than it cost me, or did I get less than it cost me to do the work, right? That's the only way to do it. But here's where you're lucky, Mr. or Mrs. Home Seller. I actually have done that. We are investors, which means we buy houses and wholesale them to other people. Sometimes we sell them as is, sometimes we fix them up. We've done a bunch of different things. And so, what I can tell you in my experience as an investor is I'm usually pretty happy if we can make 10 to 15% on top of our cost as an investor type person. So if I've put $100,000 into the home and it makes $15,000, $20,000 on top of that investment, then that's successful. Is that really what I do as an investor? No, but of course, we also make money when we buy the property too. But if I just bought at market value, right? If I didn't get a discount to the market, which I need to for my risk and all the other things that I do as an investor, just really cleaning the thing and doing the work, what's my markup going to be? I would need to be pretty happy with probably 15% markup on the just material and labor investment. And that's okay, because in addition to the money, the house is going to sell so much faster. In addition to the money, a buyer of a home where all of the broken things have been fixed maybe is the one that might be willing to waive a home
Oh,
inspection,
let's
right?
let's
So
walk
there's
out. I'm putting a
10,
pin in
yeah,
this because that's great. Is one of the things, thank you for putting that, is when we're selling a home, it's how am I getting you the most amount of money, right? With the terms that you need and the timeline that you're providing. right? There's a 30-day price, 60-day price, 90-day price for a home. And I don't know if it's been my experience over the hundreds of transactions that I've seen is we're trying to expand our buyer pool. And there is a buyer pool that will not buy a house that has things that are broken in it. They are not buying projects. They have too much going on, right? The
Sure.
carpenter's shoes, the carpenter's kids have no shoes. So it doesn't even matter if they're handy, right? Like they don't have time to work on their house.
Hmm.
Um, so they're not buying that product. And when you've got those issues, when the house is dirty and when there's a lot of dinged up things, the trim's all jacked up from the dogs and the paint is all scuffed, like people start making assumptions about plumbing and electrical and roofing and right because they're just reasoning off the things that they can see. Jamie,
Correct.
you've sold over 200 houses. So Jamie just opened a grid chapter in Raleigh, a grid investor chapter. So if you're watching this, right, I'd love to hear your take on this. If you can unmute, right? Like, what do you find? What happens when you go into repair negotiations and in a market where you've got that house that you haven't done those market ready renovations?
I think there are different tiers, right? If you're dealing with 1,400 to 1,600 square foot 3.2s, that's a different beast than the 3 to 4,000 square foot luxury home. So the buyer that's going to buy your 3,000, 4,000 plus square foot home is in a higher price point, and they're going to expect better things, better features in their house, as opposed to your 3.2, 1,400 square foot home. It's probably an entry level buyer. So the standard is going to be just fine. They want a clean house, they want it nicely painted and fresh carpet. And so you can get away with the lower cost items in those renovations, in my opinion. Oftentimes in those homes, I find that if we're just talking about being an agent, you can just list that and somebody's going to pick it up, whether it's an investor or if it's just a first time home buyer or something of that nature. But when you go to the higher priced homes, you definitely have to think about better renovations.
And I think, Justin, don't a lot of these conversations start before we get there as a contractor? You're having this conversation as an agent, and I'm guessing
Yes.
fairly early on, you're trying to figure out what price they have in mind that they're expecting to sell this home for, right? You need to know if you're on the same planet as your client with their expectation. And that has a lot to do with it. So if someone's expectation of a home that's, needs a lot of work and has some problems, and I as an investor would pay $400,000 for that home, if the seller's expectation is, well, I'd be happy if I get $400,000 for the house. Okay, you know what? You don't need to do a lot, right? I can make you happy without doing that. We can also talk about how maybe we can make you more happy and maybe you can get that, hopefully 10 to 15 maybe percent on an investment that you put into things, but you don't have to if you're happy at 4. But if you told me, yeah, the neighbor across the street sold for 6, I need 6. Okay, then now we're having the discussion of, okay, well, let's look at this home at 6. Let's look at its kitchen and bath and paint and flooring and lighting and exterior, right? You don't have these things. So in order to get those things to be competitive with the house at 6, here's what you need to do. And that's where your contractor says, and here's what it's going to cost, right? So it's all, you got to squeeze the balloon at both ends and figure out where your seller is in what they're expecting, what they may be willing to invest, if they have any thought around what they think a thing might cost. I can't ever convince anyone that cannot be convinced that something is worth doing. All I can do is give them our best advice. This is what I would do if I owned your home as an investor. And I know you don't want to think of it that way, but this is a return exercise for you. And while I can't tell you exactly what the return is going to be, you should at least think of it that way. And so I can tell you, because I do this for a living, not just for you, but for myself, I take risk money in a home that must sell for more than I put into it, or I don't make a living. When I do that exercise, this is what I would do. I would do it because it should give me that 10, 15, maybe 20% return on the thing that I did. If it works for me, it should work for you. That's why we're suggesting you do these things. But if what you're telling me is, I've got to get to 6. Well, fine. The house across the street that got 6 has all new windows. Would you like all new windows? Here's the price for the all new windows. I wouldn't do it because I don't think you get that money back. Buyers don't go around looking at, oh, look, it's the argon gas insulated window. You won't get that value back. And so if someone will let me do my thing and ramble on for an hour about what actually does move the needle in your particular home, I will tell you the things that I would do and why. But that comes back to hopefully having a relationship with someone like us and let us do that heavy lifting so that you don't need to go in with your tape measure and try to help your seller figure out, well, exactly how much you're going to spend on floor. Seller, what I can tell you is I could get you someone out here who will tell you what you should do, who will tell you exactly what it will cost, and their background is doing this for a living as an investment. And so if they know how to focus on return for them, they'll be able to focus on return for you. I can tell you though, generally, because I've been around these guys, that they're going to say declutter, clean, paint, carpet, stage. Don't let us leave without talking about that really quick. Uh, and just you're trying to get the seller to know that you are their connection to the expert that can walk them through the actual final number. You just need to figure out what planet they're on. Are they a 600 seller? Or are they a 400 seller? Have they mentioned that they have no money at all to put into the house? Fine. We need to have a slightly different discussion than if you know they've said, I know I got to do a few things. I'm ready to invest a little bit to get the home 100% ready for market. Just help understand what their psychology is so that we can be kind of set up for success when we talk about what needs to be done, but then have your contractor do as much as possible of talking about what it is, how much, and why it's valuable. And that's why the contractor matters. You don't want somebody that just comes out there and just waits for you to say what you want. Okay, take a note. I get back to you. And here's the thing. We work a little harder to explain the value proposition and what you don't need to do. As I said, I like to tell people I might be the first contractor that tries to talk you out of stuff if you have ideas of the things that you are thinking of doing, because you probably don't need to do as much as you think you might to get this home polished up, ready for the market with a good agent priced properly to get you that best price terms and time on market. So that's how we frame the conversation. That makes sense?
It does make sense. We're at 9:20, so we wrap this one up. We're about 5 minutes over, and so thank everybody for being on here on Tactical Tuesday, for joining us. We've been great. Gage, do you have some final thoughts you want to share with us?
I think we covered everything as well as we could. Looking forward to meeting with all the realtors out there and seeing what we can do together and improve listing costs and bring it in. Yeah.
So you guys are for we are an organization, that grew out of Northern Virginia. So you guys are active in that Northern Virginia area. Is that right? If I'm not in Northern Virginia and I'm trying to figure this out, right? How could I tap in? How do I connect with you? Could I DM you? Would you give me, just kind of a quick take? Because I think the challenge a lot of us face is like, that's awesome. Yeah, I'd love to use Gage and Bex, but I don't have that. I'm dealing with the contractor, and the contractors want me to call the shots.
Yeah.
So
So a couple
Yeah.
things. Well, Gage, how would you approach it?
I mean, I'm always open for some conversation and networking, and I know we're looking to scale and grow and hopefully get into those markets at one point and another. Um, it can't become a full-time job of answering the calls, though.
Uh,
yeah,
but to Gage's point, tell us where you need us, because yeah, this is a business that we might be expanding. But a couple of things. One, a good contractor can give you a decent rough guess from good quality photo and video. I tell agents and even some of our estimators just go out, get good photos, get good, slow, detailed video of the spaces and a few measurements, and we can pretty much tell you what it's going to cost to paint and do the flooring and change out these lights, subject to things that we can't know until you start working on them anyway. If you've got bad wiring and bad plumbing, we always tell people have a little reserve for that. We'll probably find a thing or two that might need tweaking if we start really digging into things. But give me some good photos, videos, and measurements, and we can go a long way towards building you a better than rough budget. for most things that we do in most houses. And your contractor in your market should be able to do that as well. So we're all about networking. Get to your local investor meetup events, a grid event if you have one. That hopefully will be attracting other contractors like us who have done some investing, who are thinking like we do. What we really are good at is maximizing the return on the investment for both ourselves and our homeowners. So meet those contractors where they're going to be at investor kind of things. That's how you'll build your Rolodex of contractors that you need to do the work the way that we're talking about doing it. And the last thing that I was going to make a point of, Justin, I mentioned staging. I believe that is a uh, almost as important function of getting a home ready for sale as some of the repairs are. And again, it's not super easy to sell. So the way I tell people that I came to conclude that staging is worth doing is, again, as an investor, the way I used to do it, freshly renovated house, everything's been touched, everything's pretty. Why on earth do I need to pay thousands of dollars to put somebody's furniture in it? I'm selling it like this, and we'd sell the house empty. And then I would go to my own open houses. And when I would go and like lurk in the corner of my own open house and see people walking through my very pretty but very empty home, if they have nothing else to do, that's when they nitpick your paint shade. When they have nothing else to consider, that's when they decide if they would have chosen that light fixture, or they would, if they liked the sink.
Amen.
That's right.
Amen.
People will focus on what's in front of them. So what we want to put in front of them is not a collection of parts, but a home. We're in the experience making business here on the seller side, right? We want people to connect with our homes. I want people to see their kids at that table that's got a plate on it doing their homework. We want people to engage with the home. Furniture and staging makes people engage with a home. I know it because I've seen it, because I can feel it, and I've heard it. So that's why we tell people, please consider doing some things after you've cleaned and cleared and removed, and especially if you're moving out and the home is otherwise going to be vacant, stage the home, even if you don't use me. Yes, it is a service we provide, and we can put a line item on there for the staging, but however you do it, it's that final thing that you can do that when a buyer comes in helps create connection to the home. That's what all of this is about. Yes, we want it to be pretty. Yes, we want to fix the broken stuff, but all of that's about connection. Staging is an important part of making connection. So put that on the list of things to do and to consider when you're considering doing things to a home to get it ready for sale. And I'll end with that.
I think that is the greatest point ever. There's always the one person in there. How do I demonstrate my value as a guy? Well, honey, I pick apart. Let me point out all the little things they didn't do. Right? Look how good I am. I'm the. It could be the girl. Doesn't matter gender roles, but how do I pick apart the things that aren't done in there? And I'm picking
And
apart.
that's what they'll do, right? Give them something else to do besides pick your house apart.
Well, you want to say we're selling homes, not houses. People
Great
don't
point.
have emotional responses to houses. They have
Great point.
emotional responses to homes. And I love that. And that's to wrap it all up. So when you talked about doing those things, painting the house, right? Changing the lighting so it feels more warm, right? Addressing flooring. Why is flooring so important? Let's wrap this up for you. Flooring's really important because if I'm moving in, if I'm moving from one house to the other, I can't do the flooring. How am I going to do the flooring once I move my furniture in? It's a giant pain. So even
Yep.
if I could do it, it's a fix. It's like, does that make sense? Like it's challenging to do practically as a buyer. Like I
Great
know
point.
it's just carpet, but it's difficult to fix. When you've done it for me, even if I don't love it, okay, great. We can move in, on that same day. I love it. Scott says they focus on the echo. Uh, you know, because there's
Yep.
no furnishing. Yeah, the house appears louder, all kinds of things right there. Bare
Yep.
hotel rooms aren't very inviting. So I appreciate you guys so much for jumping in. Both Success Leaves Clues wearing these grid hats. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can go on our YouTube channel. There's over 400 videos on there. If you're curious what Grid Investor is, so Gain is the virtual brokerage. We're giving you tactics as an agent you can take in your business. But on this side of the game, the investor side of the game, if you want to understand any of that, Grid Investor is the largest agent-led investor network in the country. Grid is a leader in Shenandoah Valley. Jamie, that just jumped on, is a leader down in Raleigh. Bex is a leader in Western Virginia. I'm a leader here in Knoxville, Tennessee. And so if you want to hear more of us, you can go on YouTube and you can hear us going deep on these things. We just talked about how to estimate renovations for 90 minutes. We got really deep in our Knoxville market that's hyper local, and you can find Bex teaching that. And Gage, I don't know if you've taught it yet. If you do, it would be up there on the YouTube channel, for the Shenandoah Valley, right? So we've got some resources for you. Next week, we are going to be joined by Paulie Campanaro, Paulie C, who gave us the playbook that we use for uh, prospecting like a pro. So that is how my partner Corey and I, how we trained ourselves on calling expires and calling for sell by owners. And so we're going to dive into the tactics of today. We talked about what do I do when I have a listing. We're going to teach you how to go get listings next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. We'll see you then. Be excellent, y'all.